now. I guess it's the same day, right? Now we're going to move into uh, Hispanics and also African Americans and how their role is in the 1940s. We're going to start with Hispanics here. There was a man named Felix Longoria. Felix Longoria served his country very valiantly and unfortunately lost his life in World War II. However, when he came home to his uh, state where his parents had been living as braceros, and we'll get to them in a second, he was refused interment or burial in the local cemetery um, because of his race. Now, this is definitely a problem, and this is called in history the Longoria incident, and it actually resulted in the president being, or not, sorry, president, but the Senator Johnson, who would later become a president, uh, making sure this, and Felix Longoria's body, as a result, will be buried at Arlington National Cemetery, which is a major memorial. And so, how does this happen? There existed for Hispanic GI something called the American GI Forum. When they got a hold of the way that Felix was being treated, or his family is being treated, they did send away, and as I said, Johnson will make sure that he receives the recognition he did. All right. Now, as I told you there, his parents had been living there in Texas as braceros. Now, the bracero is a program that we started in World War II, and bracero is literally translated a handyman, more or less, all right? A brazo is your arm, and so these are people who are going to use their arm to an extent. Now, the braceros came to this country in the 1940s and 50s, or 1940s, and then when the people came back, these braceros are stuck here. They were given the option, you can stay here, or you can go home. And a lot of them, realizing, Mexico had many, many revolutions, the United States had many, they actually stick here. And I had a student who played for me and also was in my class whose grandmother was a bracero. He brought his bracero, his grandmother had kept the bracero ticket that they had given them, basically saying they could stay there. Now, this did not make them a citizen. They still had to go through the naturalization process, but in the nonetheless, it is there. And so that's how, if you go through Texas and Arizona and things like that, you'll see a lot of Hispanic farmers, and most of them will have gotten their start as these braceros. All right? Now, move on to this. When we last left in 44, I know we're going way back, President 44 was FDR, and he passes away. And so then we get Harry Truman. Harry Truman ends the war. We know about the bombs, etc. In 1948, we have a massive election. And what happens here is, look at this. We have a Democrat, and we have something called a Dixiecrat. The Democratic Party splits in the North and in the South. Now notice the South will be here in these yellow, and they carried some interesting states. They carried Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and South Carolina, where Thurman was from. And so because of that, he lost, almost 30 electoral votes. And so it's not feasible. How in the heck can Truman win with this split? So much so that the Chicago Sun-Times actually printed out that Dewey defeated Truman. And this is an ironic picture, of course, because you see Truman had won. Now this is in his Memorial Museum, and as a result, people go, why does it take so long to know who won the presidential race? We just want to know. They don't want to look stupid like the Chicago Daily Tribune did, basically jumping the gun. So 1948, the Democrats are split. Truman wins against odds. Okay? Now, Truman announced his program. I remember in 44, he's really kind of just carrying on FDR's mantle. He's really just trying to get through the war. But in 48, he has his chance to really start making things happen. He calls this thing, his domestic program, if you will, the Fair Deal. And a lot of people say he's going to help workers, he's going to help African Americans, etc. And so let's see what he does. Now, one of the things he really tried to focus on, maybe not so much because he wanted to, but because he saw it could be potentially a problem, were African Americans. And so he will actually sign Executive Order 9981. Which, remember, an executive order in the words of Saturday Night Live, I just kind of happened. Um, Now, what did this executive order do? It will desegregate the armed forces, and that's a major move. Major. Um, it's based on the merits of the Tuskegee Airmen. Also, we have the Japanese Regimental Force, and a slew of other things that go with this. And so, as a result, when this starts to happen, this is when the Democrats split, and this is when the Dixiecrats are created, and we'll get to them in a second. Now, to show you an example here, okay, he wipes out segregation in the armed forces, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to wipe out segregation together. Case in point, young Jackie Robinson, as you see him here, served in World War II. He knew about how this is, and he knew when he came home. Now, Jackie Robinson had another love, and that was sports. The man played about every sport you can imagine at UCLA. Football, basketball, baseball, track. But baseball was his love. He wanted to be a baseball player. And he pushed around for years in the Negro Leagues of Kansas City Monarchs, etc. And he had a shot. And so he took that shot and signed up with the Brooklyn Dodgers in 1947. Now what happened from there, I'm sure everyone has heard, but he was not treated very, very kindly. And it oftentimes scared for his life. And not only him receiving death threats in his family, but also the manager who put him on the team. Now, he took it in stride, and as you can tell in the movie, there were probably some times where he wanted to retaliate but didn't. But what do we learn about Jackie Robinson here? It just is a really good example of how just because the president or the military wanted to desegregate, society was still not ready. Society kind of has to be ready, and now they'll have to be forced into it. And so really the force will be the civil rights movement, Dr. King and the marches, etc. And so we'll get into that in a minute. Now, as I said earlier, back to this, right? The Democratic Party was split, and we have the Southern Democrats created, aka they call themselves the Dixiecrats. Now, you can see what they're for because it's on here 3 times. Strom Thurmond is for states' rights, states' rights, states' rights. Now, if you remember, the Civil War was fought over states' rights, and the biggest state right they had was the right to own a slave. So slavery was not the only issue of the Civil War, but it was a key issue. So states' rights begins to emerge from this point, and this is also at the point that the so-called Confederate flag, as it is called, begins being used in South Carolina because it is it's actually a battle flag from Tennessee. It's not the actual Confederate flag. You can go look that up and see the difference. But nonetheless, it is associated with that time. And so people began to wave this and wanted to go back to a different era. Now, the man in charge of the Dixiecrat party is Senator Strom Thurmond. Now, Senator Thurmond runs for president here. He doesn't win, but he stays in Congress for quite a while, promoting this thing of that. Now, so see, there you have the, as they call them, stars and bars, the battle flag of the Confederate that is beginning to be used by the Dixiecrats, and especially takes a hold, especially during civil rights and the KKK, etc. Now, something really interesting is here. Here's Senator Thurmond, and he passed away late in life, and a couple of days after he passed, weeks, this woman came out and said, Senator Thurmond is my father. Not a big deal, right? Love child. She happens to be black. And so that really ruffled some feathers. Evidently, Senator Thurmond, as a young man in college, had an affair with his African-American maid and fathered this child out of wedlock. He did take care of her, put her through college, etc. And for that reason, she respected her father and didn't want to embarrass him. Yet when he passed on, she felt it was time that this be known. And so really, did he really feel that way about states' rights and about African Americans, or was it all a ploy just to keep his position of power? So that's something we always got to consider there, what's really being said. Okay. Now, I didn't put it on here, so I'll go back to this. But the main point here as well, we have the Civil Rights Commission in 1946. This is the first presidential commission set up to study civil rights, are they being met? So this is Truman. He's studying, are people's civil rights being met? Are they being protected, etc.? And that's a very important thing, because what we learn from it is no. And so from there, Truman and really Eisenhower are forced into issues as they come about, because they see civil rights are not being met. Right? So that's the end of the 1940s. Really, I talked about some 50s stuff there too. The next thing we'll talk about is the Crucible and witch hunts and all kinds of fun stuff with the communists. All right?